Georgia has charged activists with RICO as if they are a criminal enterprise. We've been here before. The Stop Cop City protesters, once again, being criminally harassed by state agencies. So much so that even a local elected prosecutor said, I am no longer going to work with the state on this because we have a different philosophy of prosecution. I'm talking about DA Boston of DeKalb County. Let's put it up. Full mass, who's doing it? Let's go to Attorney General Chris Carr announces the sweeping indictments against 61 Cop City activists at a September 5th news conference. Let's put up one tweet that contextualizes the saga you see before you. Stop Cop City says, and I quote, when the state hands down RICO charges for passing out Stop Cop City flyers and bailing people out, and the date of George Floyd's murder is on the indictments, they're telling you that this is about a limitless police state where cops can act with impunity and resistance is illegal. We had Reverend Kiana Jones on the program, a local minister in Atlanta, in East Atlanta to be exact. She opposes Cop City. She went viral for the sermon she preached to members of the Atlanta City Council. She has taken offense to these RICO charges against those who protest the Stop Cop City movement. Here's some of that interview.
This country has been upended by governments across the nation trying to build cop cities in order to quell protests because the government is simply upset that people seek to oppose and use their First Amendment right to protest when we see injustice coming from those in authority.
And can you talk about examples of the charges? For example, handing out flyers, Kiana.
Yes, people were indicted for handing out flyers. And what those flyers contained, first of all, messages that say Stop Cop City, messages that give details about what Cop City truly is, that it is not just a public safety training facility, that it is actually a militarized training facility that would destroy 381 acres of forest land in a black neighborhood where the city of Atlanta essentially had no jurisdiction in DeKalb County, but somehow backroom deals were made and laws were broken in order to acquire the land. Some of the flyers actually named the murderers of Manuel Esteban Paez Terán, known as Tortuguita. There is nothing that is wrong with giving information. So information that was obtained through public record that said, hey, there was a protester that was killed for sitting with their hands up. These are the perpetrators. We need justice. We want justice. I don't understand how giving out flyers with information is domestic terrorism. I don't understand how holding a sign that says Stop Cop City is domestic terrorism. I don't understand how opposing the government, using your legal right to protest, your right to freedom of speech is domestic terrorism.
If you remember, one of the activists who's a board member for the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, a fund established after the killing of Rashad Brooks in Atlanta. They were raided. Him and his fellow board members had their homes raided. What was their job? What did they do? They bonded people out of jail. They coordinate with NAACP and other civic organizations to do so. They do very good work. We also had him on the show, Mr. Marlon Counts. Here's some of that.
I mean, I think it goes to the ridiculously baseless nature of these charges that the first judge who set eyes on them, who, he isn't even asked to make judgments about the facts of the matter, right? He's just asked to set bond. But as soon as he sees the arrest warrants, his first reaction is, this is not impressive.
That's right.
The quote is, there's not a lot of meat on these bones. And he immediately goes against the prosecution's request, grants bond. I don't know what else we need to demonstrate that these charges are baseless.
The judge in the case literally said during the bond hearing that this seems like a freedom of speech violation, talking about and talking against the state government. The government requested no bond. The judge gave them a bond that allowed them to get out for basically $150. Okay, that's a judge looking at the evidence presented for the raid itself. And then someone leaked a recording, allegedly, of APD officers, Atlanta police officers, talking about the targeting, the specific targeting of protesters. Here it is.
Anybody else think that warrant that they served today and the arrest are just guaranteed shenanigans next Monday and Tuesday?
Yep. Actually, maybe tomorrow. I think they're supposed to have their first appearance tomorrow.
I'm here for all of it. Matter of fact, just do it all June. Trying to get my backyard done.
I mean, it could go the opposite way. I mean, we've been putting pressure on them and attacking them from all different angles. At some point, they've got to give up. I mean, especially if we're going after all the money, it could shut them down.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Like, couldn't they wait until like Wednesday of next week to do this? Is that when you're off? No, that's when the finance committee would have been done. Would have been done by Wednesday. Okay. Oh no, they had to send a message. I get it, but I mean, think about it. If they had just defeated the thing in council, which, they're going to vote for the money and everything's going to go through, and then the coup de grace is, right after you failed 2 days in a row, we serve a warrant on you.
True, that's what they did the last go around. I guess they wanted to, go ahead and get it over with. I guess they thought it was going on in the offensive.
All right, let's put it up. Now, those officers talked about everything but the thing that they are hired to do, enforce laws. They talked about politics, they talked about money, they talked about meeting schedule, they talked about targeting individuals illegally. They did not talk about enforcing laws. The state of Georgia has handed down RICO indictments against 61 activists protesting against the development of an Atlanta police training facility known as Cop City, leaving many to raise questions about the criminalization of free speech. Last week's indictments primarily targeted the Defend the Atlanta Forest Organization, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported. Issued on August 29th, they accused protesters of violating Georgia's Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act. There's more. Others were charged with money laundering, domestic terrorism, and attempted arson in the first degree. That's according to a press release from Attorney General Chris Carr. Out of those charged, only 13 are from, meaning born in, the state of Georgia. Defend the Atlanta Forest Organization has openly opposed the construction of Cop City along with others, a proposed training center for officers and first responders on land owned by the city of Atlanta. So let me explain what land owned by the city of Atlanta means. The city of Atlanta is inside of Fulton County, technically. However, they have annexed parts of the city in other counties. Clayton County has City of Atlanta annexation. That's where the airport is. DeKalb County has City of Atlanta annexation, meaning basically the city owns that part inside of their county. And the rules of the city will work the same, basically, inside of another county. There's more. The anarchist, anti-police, and environment activism organization, coordinates, advertises, and conducts direct action designed to prevent the construction of the Atlanta Police Safety Training Center and Shadowbox Studios and promote anarchist ideas. The indictment alleges this self-proclaimed direct action has included vandalizing of private property, arson, destruction of government property, attacks on utility workers, attacks on law enforcement, attacks on private citizens, and gun violence. At the center of this, ladies and gentlemen, is $90 million. It's actually more now, but 90 million was the original price tag. And the activists have been very successful at doing a few things. Number one, changing the public support. Changing the public support. How? By information. Giving information to everyday people who live in the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta voted on this. The city of Atlanta decided to move forward with the contract. Granted, the current mayor did not make the contract. This was a contract already designed and codified before he became mayor, but he could have ripped it up. He could have cited various contractual dynamics that were, let's just say, less than appropriate to implement, but he did not. He moved forward. He moved forward with the contract. Members of council, even those, many of those who ran on a progressive platform, voted in the affirmative to say yes to Cop City, even though East Atlanta said no. And now the public narrative is starting to transform with more information coming out. But the activists could not stop the vote. They stayed until 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. They could not stop City Hall from voting in the affirmative. So what did they do? As with a democracy, they decided to go the legal route, filed a petition to get signatures that would allow them to stop Cop City development. This is allowable in the state of Georgia, upheld by Georgia courts. The city of Atlanta has taken them to court, and every time the city of Atlanta has lost. There's more. The indictment says the foundation of Defend Forest goes back to May 2020 following the death of George Floyd. They mentioned this in the indictment. Why? Who was killed by a Minneapolis police officer and whose death sparked a worldwide movement against police brutality. It argues that when the demonstrators started to cease, an undercurrent of threatening, violent anti-police sentiment persisted among some people in Atlanta, including members of the organization. Chris Carr may try to use his prosecutor's power to build his gubernatorial campaign to silence free speech, but his threats will not silence our commitment to standing up for our future, our community, and our city. Cop City Vote, a coalition standing against the project, told the AP in a statement. According to prosecutors, 225 incidents included in the extensive indictment highlight allegations that members threw rocks and Molotov cocktail through the Department of Public Safety headquarters window, causing a fire and injuring 2 people in the summer of 2020. That summer predates the movement against Cop City by a full 2 years. As the Atlanta City Council's vote to move ahead with the training center came in September of 2022. The indictment also lists an incident from earlier this year in March, where it accuses a member of assaulting a police officer and creating a mob that attacked law enforcement guarding the site while also setting construction vehicles on fire. 3 activists, who officials say handed out flyers that labeled a state trooper who gunned down a demonstrator who was camping on the site a murderer, were included in the indictment. Now, understand what they're saying. If you say a police officer committed murder on a flyer and you hand it out and you tell people who the officer is that you believe committed murder, you're going to be indicted. Now, you may not like the terminology, but it is protected speech. It is protected speech. There's more. This country has been upended by governments across the nation trying to build cop cities in order to quell protests because the government is simply upset that people seek to oppose and use their First Amendment right to protest when we see injustice coming from those in authority. Stop Cop City organizer Reverend Kiana Jones said during an interview on Democracy Now! Jones continued, I don't understand how opposing the government, using your legal right to protest, your right to freedom of speech, is domestic terrorism. Now, here we are. I want to provide proper context here. Republicans are very upset that one man named Donald Trump is being prosecuted for crimes he absolutely committed. Many of those crimes are actually on video. They are saying that, well, this country has a two-tier justice system, that his rights are being violated, that everything he said that could have been interpreted as illegal should be covered under freedom of speech. And then you have young, committed, not well economically stable activists who just give a damn. Their rights are being violated. Judges are literally saying this on the record, speaking out of turn. Their rights are being violated severely. Has anyone on the right said anything? Of course not. They're concerned about one man named Trump. That's it. Nothing else. Their argument and their position is not authentic. They believe in personality, not policy. But I guarantee you this, if those on the left really believe that Donald Trump had his rights violated, guess what? They would actually say something. All right, Yasmin, thoughts here.
Yeah. RICO is how Rudy Giuliani famously took down the mob in New York City. So it is a great way to indict groups of people who work together to run a whole operation. And it's usually reserved for large scale, widespread organized efforts to commit crimes. We don't see them too often, but we recently saw RICO charges used against the fast fashion brand Shein for stealing creative works from designers, and that made sense. And then we saw RICO charges again used against Trump and his accomplices, and that made sense. But now we're seeing them used against protesters in Atlanta. And comparing the work of activists and protesters to the work of the mob and other similarly nefarious entities is deplorable, and they know it. They know what they're doing. Now, obviously, these organizations that have been and the people who work for these organizations who have been indicted, obviously they're organized because that's what they're doing. They're doing a job, they're working towards something. And what the work that they're doing isn't illegal. They're protesting and they have the right to do that. Not just that, but they have the public support behind them. And that is why they're being targeted this way. These indictments have basically criminalized exercising one's freedom of speech against governmental structures and even environmental activism. The incidents of violence cited by the prosecutors didn't have anything to do with these anti-cop city activism movements, but they had to use the date of George Floyd's death as a starting point for anti-cop domestic terrorism, which is what they're referring to it as, in order to build their whole RICO case. And I would say that all of this is very ironic and that the cops are literally proving the point that these activists are warning against. They're behaving in a way that the activists said that they would, but it's not irony. They're not pretending to be anything other than what they are. And they're pushing forward with their plan, regardless of what the public and the city have to say about it. They're doing what they want by force because they can, and they have empowered themselves to do so.
Very well said. And let me say this for the record. I'm anti-bad cop. I'm not anti-cop. I'm anti-bad cop. I'm pro-good cop. But if you are anti-cop, guess what? You have that right to simply be anti-cop if you wanted to. If that's your perception, that is perfectly legal in the United States of America.